Hey, happy Friday. This week Apple showed that they're getting even more greedy somehow. Big tech companies and especially Meta had a pretty devastating quarter financially, and autonomous driving seems dead-ish. Welcome to the Friday Checkout. Okay, we'll start the brief with some new product launches, of which the Moto Razr 2022 has me the most excited. It just got announced for Europe with a €1,200 price tag, which is more than you would have to pay for a Flip 4 these days, but the Razr does have some advantages over the Flip 4, like a bigger outside display and a smaller crease. Weirdly, there's no confirmation yet if the new Razr will actually head to the US as well. Next up, Nothing announced their new ear sticks, which are new earbuds with a more open design and no silicone tips, unlike the Earbuds One, so no active noise cancelling, but there is a very fancy looking twisty case for $99. I like the plug-in style earbuds with the silicone tips more personally, but these definitely look stylish. Next, this week, Microsoft released its Windows Dev Kit 2023, an ARM-based sort of Mac Mini-like Windows PC for $599. Designed for helping people build Windows on ARM apps, while also putting Android 12L on the Surface Duo finally with a skin that now makes Android look a lot more like Windows. Next up, Huawei had mixed news this week. On the good side, the Huawei Mate 50 Pro launched outside of China, and I have one here, with new innovations in its camera like a manual aperture with tiny little blades for going from f1.4 to f4 in 10 different possible steps. That's very cool. Of course, there's no 5G and there are no Google services, but the camera seems nice at least. While Huawei has also had some bad news this week, with the US Department of Justice charging 2 alleged Chinese spies for trying to bribe officials to interfere in the US investigations of Huawei. Oops. Moving on, one of my favorite news this week was Sony announcing that all of its major wireless earbuds will finally support Bluetooth multi-point connections this fall. Then Samsung said in an earnings Q&A that we will be focusing our growth strategy next year around the flagship segment that further expands the foldable, so expect something more than the Flip and the Fold series, I guess. And finally, by the time you're watching this video, Elon Musk will have probably bought Twitter. I'm filming this on a Thursday, so for me he hasn't yet, but it's actually scheduled for Friday, so I suppose by the time you're watching this video, the deal should have gone through. Alright, that's it for the brief. Links to all the newly announced products like the ear sticks and the new Razr phones and everything, they're all down in the description. And my first story of the week is actually going to be Apple getting pretty damn greedy in multiple ways this week. First, Apple changed App Store rules mandating that both NFTs and social media boosts from within iOS apps will now have to be done through in-app purchases, which Apple wants to take a 30% cut from going forward. Ouch. Second, new types of ads recently came to the App Store, as expected, but Apple made an unexpectedly big mess of the rollout, really annoying developers with things like wildly inappropriate listings, such as a therapy app showing ads for gambling and casinos. Not great. The situation was bad enough for Apple to actually pause ads for certain categories, like for example gambling, which I suppose is good, but also means that they've admitted that they haven't actually built any real controls in the first place, and I suppose they're just true to their own slogan of move fast and break things. Or was that Facebook? Hard to say these days. Anyway, the backlash runs deep, with one former Apple engineer tweeting that Apple insiders who saw the ads in early iOS betas hated it and made their, quote, strongest pushback effort in their time at Apple. Obviously, their pushback failed, and I've made a whole video explaining how Apple is trying to build an ad empire on top of iOS, which you can watch somewhere here. But anyway, there's also a third Apple story this week as well. Specifically, at an event this week, the company finally admitted for the first time publicly that yes, they will have to bring USB-C to iPhone due to the EU's new rules in 2024 at the latest. Specifically, they said that, quote, obviously we'll have to comply, and then they also made a bunch of wild claims about how this is bad for the environment and whatever, even though literally all of the company's own iPads and Macs only run USB-C. Very convincing. Well, regardless of what we feel like, their strategy seems to be working because Apple was one of the only tech giants this week announcing a pretty decent quarter of earnings. Meanwhile, all the other tech giants announced somewhere between a bad and a terrible quarter, at least compared to themselves, and Meta actually fared the worst, which is going to be my second story of this week. Companies like Alphabet, Amazon, and Microsoft reported mixed or weak earnings, with Windows PC sales being down somewhere around 15%, for example. Amazon's profitability expected to decline as the economic slowdown hits them hard, and the online ads business slowing dramatically for most companies as well, for example, Alphabet. Sundar Pichai, funnily enough, said that, quote, "I think compared to the past, I think going through this, as we've said before, there is more uncertainty as we go through. We definitely see indicators on both sides, so that makes it a bit more unique." Yeah, that's what a CEO sounds like who isn't exactly thrilled about their own earnings, but still that is nothing compared to the beating that Meta has received. So Meta's core social apps did okay with only small-ish revenue drops, but building the metaverse is getting even more brutally expensive, with the company having to add 19,000 more of the world's most expensive employees to make it a thing. Meta has gone from 25,000 employees 4 years ago to 87,000 plus employees in a short period, and compelling VR worlds still seem like a pretty long way off. Meta's stock price dropped by more than 20% upon the news, and the company has now lost a brutal $700 billion of its value from its previous high. Oof, that does not sound like fun. And my third story of the week is going to be perhaps an even bigger oof, as autonomous driving seems to be in a maybe even bigger trouble than traditional tech companies. The big surprise this week is that Argo AI, an important and leading autonomous car company once valued at $7 billion, which was jointly owned by Ford and Volkswagen, will simply close, with Ford's head of technology saying that driverless autonomy is, quote, "the hardest technical problem of our time, and that it's harder than putting a man on the moon." That is a massive admission of defeat, and as the companies tried to conserve cash, Ford has announced shifting people from developing autonomous vehicle technology over to simpler things like advanced driver assist systems instead. Ford is far from being alone, as Rivian's CEO came out last week saying that it will focus on advanced driver assistance systems instead of full self-driving as well, claiming that full self-driving is much harder than expected. Companies like Waymo and GM's Cruise are operating driverless vehicles around in public roads but with limited capabilities, and others like Tesla aren't giving up entirely yet. Plus Mobileye, Intel's own autonomous driving and driver assist hardware maker, had a reasonably successful IPO this week, so it's not completely the end of the road, so to speak, but clearly the problem seems to be much harder than expected, and companies who are starting to become much more conservative with their cash in the current economic climate might just not be willing to finance the research when the results are that far off into the future. That sounds kind of understandable. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. That's it for this week. Subscribe if you haven't already. Do check out that Apple ads video if you haven't seen it yet. It should be somewhere here again, and I'll see you next week.